Hi, welcome to the first installment of our new podcast. I'm Russell Newquist.
And I'm Morgan Newquist.
We are the co-founders of Silver Empire Publishing. Silver Empire publishes fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and other genre fiction. And we also do author services to help other authors who are not our authors through Silver Empire to help you make more money selling your books. And that's mostly what this podcast is going to be about. We're going to be talking about what you can do to sell more books. And for today's episode, the very first episode, we're going to be talking about the absolute bare minimum you need to know if you're going to sell a book. This is not going to make your book bestseller, not this episode alone. But if you don't know these things, this bare minimum, you're going to be very lucky to sell any books at all. And so that's what we're after today. We want to give you the absolute minimum. You're bound and determined to publish a book. What do you absolutely have to do if you're going to make that book sell? And that's what we're going to go into. Okay. So the very first topic that we're going to be discussing is that you absolutely have to understand your book's genre. And I don't mean this in a nerdy geek out way of, is this really this genre? Well, actually, it's this genre, that kind of thing. I'm going to explain what we mean by genre when we say it. So genre, in the sense that we use it, is a tool for readers to find the books that they like. And that's the main instances. We want to make sure that you are communicating to your reader what is your book like. So I'm going to give the simple example I use. I'll show my age here for anybody who's old enough to remember. In the 1990s, there was a spate of movies that came out. All of them were the same. It was, you had Speed, which was advertised as Die Hard on a bus. Speed 2, Die Hard on a boat. Executive Decision, Die Hard in an airplane. What are you doing here? So what's happened? Well, what's happened is that the people who made those movies had a way to explain in one sentence very quickly, both to a movie executive and to a potential moviegoer, what are you getting out of this movie? And what kind of movie is this? And that's what they were able to do. And that's what genre really is in this case, the way we mean it. You are trying to communicate to your reader, what is this book like? And you're going to and to do that, you're going to need to be looking at other books that are like your book and trying to communicate that your book is like those books.
And here's the hard to swallow pill on this is, in a sense, when you're marketing it, your readers get to decide whether you're right or not you.
That's right. That's the part that's tough. And we've been through this with our own books. And with the authors that we publish, we've been through this where the authors, including ourselves, come in and think, well, this is what my book's like. It's like this. It's like this. And the readers get to it and they say, no, it's not. And you need to get this right. You really, really need to get this right for two reasons. Number one is the reader's not going to buy your book unless it's like the books that they like. They want to know, is it like the things that I like to read? And readers are very specific. Even people who think they're very eclectic in what they read, really they just have their own set of genres they like to read for the most part. And that's what they read.
You should kind of think about what you like to read a little bit and think about it in depth, and that can help you understand it, right?
That's right.
Because, I remember I've had conversations even with Russell, like, well, I don't really like horror, but I like blank. In this case, Lovecraftian. Like, I love Lovecraftian horror. And that's the thing is that's my genre, right? It's Lovecraftian horror in specifics, but I'm not a big fan of the rest of the kinds of horror. And you'll find that most people are like that.
And that's really important because when we talk about genre, we're talking about micro genre. You've got to be extremely specific about what kind of book you've got. So for instance, in paranormal romance, it's not enough to just say your book is paranormal romance. You need to get very specific and say, my book is a book about romance between a human and a werewolf, or a human and a vampire, or a shifter.
Romance? Is it vampire? Is it fallen angel? Like it gets really
it gets
specific.
really specific.
And Amazon is the reason why it gets that specific, because you can actually put your book in categories that are that specific.
But even within Amazon's specific categories, the readers get even more specific than that. So you need to really drill down very tight and figure out what genre is your book. And an exercise that I highly recommend is to go out looking at other books, go to the bookstore, go to Amazon, go wherever, and find 10 other books, preferably really well-selling books, but 10 other books that are like yours, and say, well, somebody who likes this book is going to like my book. And start with that as your list and figure out what...
You have to be really honest on this too.
That's right.
Don't try to cut corners. Don't try to trick people, because that's when you start getting 1-star reviews. And I'm going to bring up, so this is my favorite thing to bring up to make people's heads explode, is that Twilight is not a bad book. It's just not the book that people thought it was going to be when they started reading it. It's a paranormal romance. It's a romance, not urban fantasy, not vampire horror, not any of that. And a lot of the mockery that comes from Twilight is a lot of people that would normally read Anne Rice, urban fantasy, horror, vampires, or whatever, read that, and it wasn't what they were expecting. So, you know, as you look at your book and think about who would like it, think about the ridicule that Twilight gets for not matching people's expectations.
Right.
And don't do that to your book.
The other example that I'll use is with my own books, which I'm going to be using as an example a lot, because we've made a lot of mistakes.
A lot of mistakes. And we're telling them to you, so maybe you can avoid this pain.
But with my own books in specific, I get my 5-star reviews and my 1-star reviews are the same. They're exactly the same. I get people saying, in the 1-star reviews, I get people saying, this book is terrible. It reads like a brainless 80s action movie. And my 5-star reviews, I get people saying, this movie is awesome, or this book is awesome. It reads like an 80s action movie. Same exact review. What's the difference? The difference is that one group of people likes that kind of thing and another group of people doesn't. And if you communicate well which group you're in, then you're going to get good reviews, rave reviews, great word of mouth. People are going to tell their friends. And if you don't communicate well, then the people are going to pick up your book and they're not going to like it. So exercise number 1, what genre is your book? Figure it out. Go look, go find 10 other books that are like your book and figure out what genre is this really, very specifically, as specifically as you can possibly nail down. Moving on. Once you've figured out what genre your book is in, the next thing, the absolute most important thing to selling your book is the cover. You know the old expression, don't judge a book by its cover? The reason that's an expression is because everybody judges a book by its cover. You've got to get your cover right. If you put out a book with a lousy cover, it will not sell. I've heard people say that cover is 80% of a buy decision. I'm not sure it's always that high, but it's high. It's really, really high. You need a good cover. Especially
somewhere like, I mean, Amazon, nobody's going to click on the link to your book unless your cover catches their attention.
Right. It almost doesn't matter where you're selling it. On Amazon, they won't click the link if the cover doesn't catch their attention. In a bookstore, they won't pick it up if the cover doesn't catch their attention. At a convention, they won't stop at your table if the cover doesn't catch their attention. So wherever it is, however it is you're selling books, you have to have a good cover. It's super important.
I should have pulled some of those, but there are books on my bookshelf that I distinctly remember I picked up this book because I liked the cover.
I'll give an example. Actually, I'm going to pop off for a second and find it because I can find it very quickly. Know right where it's at. Well, I say that. I can find the other version of it that I bought after my first version.
The other one has fallen apart.
The other one has fallen apart. That's how it is. But the book that you will know is Game of Thrones, the original Game of Thrones. I picked it up in the late 90s with the original cover that it had that I wanted to show you. See if I can track down a copy and put the image in the show notes.
Yeah.
The original cover is a beautiful piece of art with Jon Snow riding a horse in front of Winterfell and Ghost.
Yeah, Ghost is with him.
A wraparound cover, like Ghost is on the back. It's a full art cover. It was beautiful. I bought the book for that cover. Back when it was the only book in the series, nobody knew who George Martin was. That book's fallen apart because I loaned that book to about 20 people. You're welcome, George. Send me a royalty check. I'll take 10%. That's fine. But I did. I bought that book for its cover. And I was in the target audience for that cover. It was a cover that screamed, "This is a fantasy book."
Is the Summer Country over there?
Yes.
You
In
keep
fact,
talking and I'll go get Summer Country.
it's right there. And I picked the book for its cover, and it screamed it was the right genre. And so I bought it and I shared it with a whole bunch of people. It turns out it was also a really excellent book. And pretty much everybody I shared it with thought the same thing. Pretty much everybody they shared it with thought the same thing. And that's why George R. R. Martin is richer than Elvis now.
Summer Country is not up here, but
it's missing.
It's missing too. But it looked like this, but summer.
So yeah, the one she's talking about looked like this, except summer instead of wintry images. Yeah, I know the cover she's talking about. It's a very striking, very eye-catching cover.
I also like redheads.
Really attractive redheaded girl. Like it or not, attractive women on your cover will sell if they fit the book in the genre. If they don't fit the book in the genre, like if you're trying to sell space-based sci-fi, put a spaceship on the cover.
And here's one important, maybe I want to have a full episode on covers where we have some cover artists on and we really kind of get into it. But your cover is not a piece of art. It's not a piece of art that matches a scene in your book. It's not supposed to be 100% like, okay, this is this exact scene in this setting with this person and this person wearing these clothes and they have this hair color and all of that. It's
over that.
No, it's
get over it. Get over it now.
It's marketing. And if you want people to buy your book, you have to think about it that way.
Your book cover's number one function is not to tell people about anything in your book. Your book cover's number one function is to tell them what genre is it. Okay? Your cover has to convey that function. If it does not convey that function, you will sell to the wrong people. They will not like your book, or they will not tell their friends, or it won't sell at all. Okay?
And don't take this to mean that like the art on your book shouldn't be good. It means that this purpose is not to be a piece of art that matches your book and matches your vision. This is the biggest thing we run into is with authors as a publishing companies, they have a vision down to every last detail how their book cover needs to look to match their book. And none of that matters. Nobody knows anything about your book when they first look at the cover.
I'll give you a great example. And I've heard Jim Butcher himself. If you know Jim Butcher, the Dresden Files, I've heard him at conventions complain about this in person. At no point anywhere in the Dresden Files series is Harry Dresden ever described as wearing a hat. It's not in there. All the book covers in the early parts of the series have Harry wearing a wide-brimmed Stetson-style hat. And those covers sold his books. They made him a wealthy man. Didn't match. Now, you've got other elements that did match. You don't want it to be a complete non-match. It does need to match enough with your book that the readers will not be surprised when they pick it up. So it does have things like he's carrying a staff, which he has in the book. He's got his duster on. So it does convey that sort of thing. But the details are not right for the book. They're actually wrong for the book. And it sold them a lot of books. So you have to get over it with that sense of details. You have to. You have to think of your cover. Number one, its primary function is to tell readers what kind of book is it. And number two, its function is to sell them on your book. It's to make them want to buy your book. It has to look interesting. That's it. If it accomplishes that,
look like the kind of book they like to read.
It has to look like the kind of book they like to read. If it accomplishes those goals, then it's a great cover, even if it doesn't match your book very well at all. So those are the things you need to keep in mind. And I've had to have this discussion with some of our authors, and they have not always loved me for it when I've told them, like, and we've had a couple books we've republished, and I've had to tell people, like, we can't use that cover. And it isn't always because it's a bad piece of art. Some of them are actually nice looking, but we've had to go on and say, you can't do this. And I'm going to pick on myself because I'm very good at picking on myself. For my first novel, I'm going to be using that as an example a lot tonight because thankfully before we really published it, we got some coaching. And what we published was pretty good. It could be a lot better now if we did it again. We know what we're doing better. But the original version would have sold me next to nothing. It would have been terrible. And so my book, I'm going to describe it for a minute first, and then I'm going to show you the cover. So my book is a paranormal supernatural thriller about a young man who went off to Afghanistan, joined up the day after 9/11 because his fiance died. He goes off to Afghanistan, he does his thing, and the book really starts when he comes home, and everybody has war demons. In his case, he has literal war demons that follow him home, and it becomes a supernatural thriller that ensues from that. And so that was the setting of the book. And the cover I'm about to show you does basically everything we just told you not to do. So what I did, I had an author that I've met at a convention, a really great guy who I love, an artist that I met at a convention, a really great guy that I really love. And Andy, if you're watching this, I am sorry because I love this piece of art. I really do.
You should put it up as like a poster or something.
I actually really should put it up as a poster. It's a great piece of art. It does not have an exact scene from my book, but it has a lot of elements from my book. It has a soldier in his body armor. It has a helicopter crash. That's what caused him to get out of the army.
With the special, the halo effect that comes.
There's a special kind of halo effect that only happens in the desert that actually happens to helicopters. I really love the way the artist did exactly what I asked and has that halo being a halo over him. There's the dragon that shows up later in the book. I love this as a piece of art. It's a full wraparound piece of art. You can't see it very well on the video. I love it, and it's an absolutely terrible cover for the kind of book that I'm selling. Everybody picks up this cover and thinks it's military sci-fi or military fantasy, and it's not. It is about a soldier who comes home, but it is not a military book. It doesn't convey the genre at all. It doesn't really say this is a modern day supernatural book. The title's a poor choice, but we're going to come back to that when we talk about titles. And I was really tied to conveying something that was from the book, and that's what we came up with. Here's what we got after I got coaching. Title change, you'll notice first, title change to War Demons. Fits the book setting that we've described really well. It conveys that this is much more of a supernatural book. It conveys a bit of an aspect of horror, which is somewhat correct. I've taken to calling it an action horror book these days, which is actually a pretty good term, and this cover fits that fairly well. If I had it to do over again, there's things I would improve, and that's not the fault of the cover artist. Steve, if you're watching, that's because I didn't know what to ask for. When I asked you for this cover, you gave me a good cover based on what I told you. It does have some great supernatural elements. That's very, I love the way the spookiness of the yellow-nosed demon from the book, looming over the main character. The coloring on it is good. And in fact, I had the artist change the coloring on this because the original version he gave me would have fit with the urban fantasy genre really well, but it looked like a book targeting women, and this is not a book targeting women. It's a 80s action movie kind of book, so I needed to change the color scheme to match that. It's a much, much better cover. It's not perfect, but it's much better fit for what I have here. And moving forward, I know what to ask for better from my artist. So the downfalls of this cover are not his fault, they're mine. Based on what I asked him to do, he did a terrific job. It fits much, much better. We're going to show you some examples of some other books we have. I'll shut my mouth for a minute and let Morgan speak. And hand her another book, some much better examples of genre fits that we've gotten since we know what we're doing.
Yeah, so this one is Woe for a Fairy Okay, and this is paranormal romance, sort of urban, the kind of crossover urban fantasy paranormal romance. And we got this one, and we'll do a quick plug, from Deranged Doctor. And that is what they do. That's another thing to think about, is there are different cover artists and, you know, cover artist groups, and they do certain genres. So one way you can figure out what you need to do is go look at the books in the genre that you've decided that you're going to use, and see who does those covers. If you want urban fantasy, paranormal romance, then Deranged Doctor is one of the cover artists for that.
Something to keep in mind too as we plug them is your covers don't have to cost you an arm and a leg. Deranged Doctor does the covers for a great many of the absolute best-selling paranormal romance and urban fantasy authors, indie authors on Amazon today. That's a $250 cover. It's not a fortune of a cover. It's not crazy. It's a little more than nothing. You don't have to spend even that much to get a good cover, but you don't have to spend $1,000, $2,000 to get a bestseller level cover. This is done literally by the same guys who do the bestsellers in the genre. It's every bit as good as the other covers in the genre, and $250. It's very reasonably priced.
Yeah, we'll show a couple other ones, and then we'll talk a little bit about pre-mades before we, as an option for you before we.
So I'll show the next one. This is another one we had done. This one was done by the same gentleman who did War Demons, and I'd plug him, except that he doesn't really do covers for anybody by himself much anymore. But this one is, I knew better what to ask him for when we asked for this one. And I bet you never could have guessed that that's a steampunk book. And that's what he did. He gave us a cover that just absolutely first glance, oh, yep, that's a steampunk book. Which means if you're trying to sell books to steampunk fans, they immediately know what it is. It's also an absolutely gorgeous cover, in my opinion. It is an amazingly beautiful cover. It's one of the best he's ever done for us. Really, really conveys the point really, really well.
And the last one we'll show, so this is one of our most expensive covers because we got custom art for it, because it's superhero, which I think you probably would have figured out from it. And so a lot of these covers are done with stock photos. Like your artist is going to take a stock photo, and then they're going to merge it with other stock photos. They're going to change hair color. They're going to do that kind of stuff to make it its own thing. But this is actual custom art, because the superhero stock photos are terrible.
They're literally a joke. As in, the stock photos available of the superhero are dad in his underwear on the outside and a cape trying to pretend to be a superhero.
Yeah,
they're
like awful.
You can't use them for that.
You can't use them. So we had to go. So we have our own superhero shared universe that we're working on, and so we had to pay for art on this. And then, you know, every time we have a superhero novel, though, this is not even though this is custom art, this is not a scene in Hollow City.
No, it's characters from the book, but it's not a scene from the book. We asked the artist to give us something visually striking, and a comment that I'll make is she gave us something visually striking enough that the first time we showed it at a con, we got asked, when can I get that on a t-shirt? Which the answer is now. You can buy it from our friends at Crypto Fashion, and it's available on a t-shirt. It looks amazing. I have one myself.
I also have one, and people ask about it all the time.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So again,
but we have long discussions like, okay, what can we do on this cover to make it clear? And this is a little bit of a thing, but make it clear that it's superheroes, right? So we have to have some expression of superpowers on the cover. You know, we're going for, we want it to look like comic, like the gold.
We wanted to have it look a little bit like a comic book cover, not too much because we don't want people to think it's a comic or a graphic novel, but we wanted to convey superheroes again. I'm going to hold this one back up for a second because this one does really well. Another aspect that makes a really great cover, something that separates the great from the good, is that it's got really bright and colorful colors. Very eye-catching, and that's important. One of my good friends who has the most amazing covers on his books. He just does the best job. And one of his secrets, he tells me, is that every time he sees it, he just keeps asking the artist to make it more colorful, make it more colorful, make it brighter, make it more colorful. And that's a really big thing. The colors that pop out will stand out to somebody, whether it's big or small, and really draw the eye to it. And that's something that you want.
But the best thing you can do is find a professional, at least until you figure out and have a good idea of what you need. But
Right.
in this case, you know, like these covers, all of these covers, even our most expensive one, costs less than $1,000.
The most money we've ever paid for a cover is around $600.
And of course you can go way higher than that and get really amazing work. But if you're watching this podcast, you are probably not.
Don't spend that much on your first book.
Don't spend that much on your first book until you figure out what you're doing. But that you can get amazing covers for not that much, and pre-mades are even less than these.
So before we go into where to go look for good covers, a couple last things you should think about. As an indie author, if you're watching this, you're going to do most of your sales online, most likely. Okay. So you need a cover that looks good small. It needs to look good in a thumbnail image. Amazon's going to give your book a thumbnail image when it's shown with all the other books that on screen is going to be a couple inches tall, tops. And you need to make sure that the imagery on your cover is visible at that size. It's very helpful if the title and the author name are legible at that size. Title more than author name, unless you're an author, unless you're known already.
Right.
If you're a known author, put your name bigger. If you're not a known author, put the title bigger.
Even that, though, is not as important as the picture.
The picture has to match the genre, and it's important that you can at least get a sense of that when it's small. A professional cover artist will know that and will have good stuff to do that. But if you're looking at pre-mades, check that first before you buy it. Shrink it down, grab it, and just shrink it down yourself in, whatever photo editor you can get, and then see how it goes. And work with that. Yeah, and the other thing to think about beyond that is if you pick up a book on your print book, can it be seen from a ways away, which is very similar to can it be seen small. But you want to look at it and be, can you see it from, halfway across the room if it's sitting on a bookshelf somewhere. So those are the last things you really want to think about with your cover before you pick one, and go with that. As far as where do you get one, you can get an amazing book cover for as little as $50 or $60 if you know what to look for. There are people out there who will do pre-made covers, and that's a little hit and miss. Yeah. Okay. You can get an amazing cover for $50 or $60.
And in this case, it's, if you don't have an idea, like, it's almost worth paying a cover artist in your genre for a couple times, even if you move to pre-mades later, because they can teach you what you need to be looking for in a good cover, if you don't know. Right.
And we got lucky with our first cover artist, the gentleman who did my novel. I was very, very lucky that we were able to just tell him, like, hey, this is the book, make me a cover, and he did. And he could do that. Not every cover artist can do that. Some of the ones we work with now, including some of the more expensive ones, we really have to give them a pretty good idea of what we want, which is good and bad. It means they give us exactly what we want, but we have to know what makes a good cover in order to do that. Mm-hmm. And now we do. We've published 50 books. Before we published 50 books, we didn't really always know what made a good cover. So it was great to have that in the beginning.
We did some bad covers on our early
We
anthologies.
did some very bad covers in the early days.
So everything we're berating you about, we have probably already done it.
Probably worse than you would have done without hearing this podcast. You can look for pre-mades. Where can you find them? We'll list a few sites in the show notes that you can find them.
There's marketplaces
there's marketplaces.
on
There's a
Facebook.
lot of groups on Facebook.
Most cover artists. So like if you do what I said earlier and then look at who's done the covers in your genre, a lot of cover artists just have their own group on Facebook where they sell their covers, they sell their pre-mades, they sell their customs. And so, you know, sometimes you can go on Facebook and find a bunch of artists by group and then join them.
Most of the good cover artists will require it, and most of the reputable indie authors are doing it anyway, where they will credit their cover artist in the book. So if you see a book that, you know, bestseller has an amazing cover and you want a cover kind of like that, grab the book, check the copyright page, see who the cover artist was. Odds are very good that you can contact that person yourself and get a cover. If it's an indie published book, odds are really good the cover costs less than $500.
Yeah, probably.
Odds are really good it costs less than $300, and you can probably get it pretty reasonably priced. We showed you one from Deranged Doctor. They're huge in the paranormal romance, urban fantasy arena. Another big name in that arena. That's one we know well because we publish a lot of books in that genre. Covers by Christian.
Yeah.
Is really big in that genre also. I would say that he's probably, those in Deranged Doctor's probably the top, and Covers by Christian is probably the second in terms of who's got the most bestsellers. They're right about at the same price range though, and they both put out fantastic covers. We've had great covers from both. And there are a lot of others out there. The cover artists that we use now for our Heroes Unleashed superhero books, ebook-launch.com. An ebook only cover there is $400 now. He's gone up a little bit. An ebook plus print is $500, but he's given us full custom art at that price. He's doing all the drawing and everything from that. I think
really
he does that,
covers.
And they do really great covers.
We don't have any of them. Or do we? Oh, we've got Gemini.
I've got one. Let me grab one. He did this one here, Gemini Warrior, and you can see a lot of the same things we credited with the other one. There's great use of color to draw eye to it, totally custom artwork. I actually think this one is a little bit better in terms of the titling and the text layout than what we had before. And I actually think that this is a better book cover, even though I like the art piece on the other one better. He has a better eye for cover design, whereas the artist who drew Hollow City was an artist, not a cover artist. And that's actually a good point to end this section on, because we've gone on long on this section, but it is important, it is the most important part. But the good point to end this on is that you really want to find a cover artist, not just an artist. It is a distinct skill of its own, and you want somebody who knows that skill. You want somebody who knows how to make a good cover. So you want to look for that, and highly, highly recommend that. Don't make a cover yourself unless you really know what you're doing. If you were a cover artist first before you became an author, you can get away with it. Most authors who try to make their own covers end up doing a really bad job of it. And even if you're short on funds, go look at the $50 pre-mades before you just call up your graphic artist friends. You really want a cover artist, not just an artist. And I'm not trying to put down your friend who's a graphic artist. He's probably really, really good, or she, whatever. But you want somebody who's had experience with it and knows what they're doing. Okay. So after covers, probably the second most important thing for selling your book is the blurb.
And I can hear everybody screaming from here when you say that, because everybody hates writing blurbs.
Everybody hates writing blurbs.
I don't.
My resident blurb writer for our publishing company is right here. She's really good at it. And I'll tell you from our own internal numbers, I have blurbs that she has rewritten for some of our authors who have not been happy with her rewritten blurb. And I can tell you, whether the author was happy or not, our conversion rate went up 50% when she rewrote the blurb. And so I'm sorry, we're keeping the blurb. And that's a big jump. And so
I also want to do a whole episode on this because you can get into a lot of details on it. But so here, there are a lot of books that can help you with this that you can go and find on Amazon. How to Write a Sizzling Synopsis is one. But you're going to have a mindset shift on this, and that your blurb is not a summary of your book. It's not a summary of your book.
I'm going to repeat that and emphasize it, because even though we're saying it, it won't sink in for most of you. It is not a summary of your book. And I'm going to say just a bit, and I'm going to let her get back to it. For us, even both of us, even her, who's really good at it now, in the early days of us writing summaries, we got that point across to us very quickly. But then we understood it, but it was hard to actually still write a good blurb afterwards. So,
believe it or not, I actually made him do it all the time, because
she made me do it in the early days, and I kind of got it, and I got the point, and I got better at it than what we've been doing before. But then she went and read a few books on it and did some practice and got way better than I was. So I'm going to let her go back to talking again, but I just wanted to really emphasize that point.
It is not a summary of your book. I'm going to say it one more time. Okay? It's advertising text. It's copywriting, but it's copywriting that happens to be for a fiction thing, not like for selling a refrigerator. Okay, so it's really important, just like your cover, that you give a sense of what the book is. And in a short rundown, the best advice I can give you for it is that, readers have not read your book, and a lot of them, if you're an indie writer, don't know who you are. So they don't care about your world building. They don't care about the great history, especially in your fantasy novel. They don't care about the Great War 3 eons ago that is influencing the actions that are happening in your book. They care about characters just like they care about genre. So you need to make it very clear, very fast, what the action is and the problem is to catch their attention, and who the main character is. This is why, it's not interesting, good, creative writing prose most of the time when you do a blurb. You want to use cliches. You want to avoid lots of weird names and stuff that people aren't going to remember. So, you have a thriller and your main character is a hard-boiled detective. Your readers need to know that, they're going to be in the ride with a hard-boiled detective really fast, because people care about the characters in books. I mean, how many series have you seen where, like, there's this breakout character that everybody loves, and the author's always like, well, they were just in there for one book, but everybody loved them. It's like they want the connection with a character. And so your blurb needs to make it really clear, really fast, what genre it is, what the problem is, what trope that your main character fits in, who your character is. And, you'll see some things like make it as short as possible, and that's not a bad measurement for it. But I don't think that's, like, a lot of people put that above everything else. And no, the big thing is you need to have something interesting enough that somebody will care about to keep reading for the next line until you get through it. And it really is kind of an art, and it takes a lot of practice, and everybody hates it. But I promise, if you put the time into it or bring in somebody that knows how to do it, you will see the returns in your book. And a lot of cases, there are various, critique groups where people are like, here's my cover and here's my blurb. And I think my blurb is okay. And I promise 90% of the time.
Don't ask other authors.
There's that, but 90% of the time your blurb is not okay.
Don't ask other authors.
Like, I've gotten to cons and people were like, well, I don't really get a lot of conversions when I sell, but I've got a good blurb. And then I look at their blurb and it's not a good blurb. if you've got a good cover and your book is not selling, the problem is the blurb. Okay? You have to understand that. If you have a good cover, that's a big if. You got to go back to the previous bit. You got to have a good cover. But
if you have a good cover and your book is not selling, it's the blurb. Okay? Guaranteed, it's the blurb. So you've got to look at that. Don't trust other authors. They don't know what makes a good blurb either. They think they do, but they don't. Okay? Most of them. If you ask another author at all, ask an author who sells a metric buttload of books. Don't ask
that is actually writing their
that
own
is
blurbs.
actually writing their own blurbs.
None of the trad published guys write their own blurbs. They have somebody who does
They
that.
have people on staff that's their job. Consider, if you can find somebody at a good price who has a good track record of selling books, consider paying somebody to write your blurb. It's a skill that's very distinct from writing your novel. You can be a fantastic novelist and an absolutely god-awful blurb writer. So
you have such a short period of time to catch someone's attention.
That's right.
Especially somewhere like Amazon, which, you know, whether we like it or not, that's where the majority of indie authors are selling their books. Almost all of the books are being sold on Amazon. There is something like 200 other books on the other page with your book. You know, there's flashing ads. There's just so much.
That's right.
So you really have to drill
them.
it in, and they have to be engaged within the first line or two.
That's right.
Like, so when you post your book on Amazon, there will be a read more button. The whatever appears before read more is the most important part of your blurb.
It has to be.
Otherwise, they will not click that fancy read more button and read more. They'll just go, yeah.
Right. You've got to connect with your readers emotionally, not logically. Yes. You have to hit them at an emotional level. It's not a summary of your book. You want to grab them by the feels, okay, and pull them in. You've got to make them care. And it depends on what kind of book you're selling, right? If you're selling a romance book, you need to grab them on the romance, right, in the blurb. If you're selling an action book, you've got to grab them on the action, right, in the blurb. If you're selling, I don't know, what's another good example?
Mystery.
If you're selling a mystery book, you've got to grab them on the mystery. That's a great example. You got to grab them on the mystery and you got to tell them in that mystery book, you got to tell them right in the beginning, what's the mystery, but also not just what's the mystery, why do you care?
Yeah, that's a good way. It's like, why, look at your blurb and think, why would somebody, you have to divorce yourself from it because it's your book and you're super emotional about it. Why would somebody care to read this? What connection are they going to get?
I'm going to go back to a point she made earlier, too, about don't put all your weird fantasy names in your blurb. The rule of thumb that I've seen is never put more than 3 strange names or 3
That's
character names.
I'm
going to put a stricter rule on it. I'm going to say put as few strange words that people don't know that you made up for your own thing in there as humanly possible. If you can get it down to 0, do 0. If your main character has a crazy weird name like that, consider renaming him. But if you can't rename him, you're just totally married to that, then maybe that's the only one you put in there. You really just
like only use their first name.
Don't make your reader think on the blurb. You need to make it absolutely obvious that they just want to buy this book right now and read it. And anything that makes them think makes them not want to buy your book. That's work.
Lots of questions are, an easy way to do this, where you put the stakes, like what's happening in the book. And I see this so much, and this comes back to it's not a summary of your book, is like, if you tell them everything that's going on in your book on the back matter, not only will it not be good copy for selling, why do they need to read your book?
Right.
They've got it. This is what happens. The end.
Think of it this way. You don't want to tell them about your story. You want to tell them why they care about your story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
anything else? I think that we could go a whole episode on just that, but we're trying to hit the basics here.
We're trying to give you a big overview of, okay, I'm going to publish a book. What do I need to look at?
Next thing, third most important thing after your cover and your blurb is your title. Okay. I almost put this ahead of blurb because people are going to see it before they see your blurb, but the blurb is actually more important. If your cover's good and your title's weird, you'll probably still draw people in. But if your cover's really good and people aren't actually clicking through to see the page, or people aren't actually picking up your book to read the blurb, the problem is probably your title. Okay. And I'm going to go back to making fun of myself. I promised I would bring this book back for this section. Post-traumatic stress. Part of me still likes that title for the book. And if you know the book, it fits the main character really well. The problem is that that's part of the reason people were picking up the book and asking me, is this a military book? The very first poster I ever put up for it, people were asking me, oh, who was in the military? Well, I wasn't in the military. I can't write that book. And one other thing is, once I started trying to actually getting ready to pre-publish it and showing it to people, title tested poorly with veterans. It was offensive in some ways. Was not intending that with the title at all. And in fact, I think if you read the book, you would find it to be anything but that. But that's how it came across. Biggest thing of all, though, is it just doesn't fit the genre. It's a supernatural action book, and that title doesn't convey supernatural at all. Went to the new title, War Demons. That actually conveys both the action and the supernatural pretty quickly in one title. And in fact, if you've read the book, it's an excellent title for the book. It's a very good one. I'm going to have to thank Nick Cole, who gave me that title for the book, and give him the nod. But the title really matters. You have to convey in your title the genre and type of book that it is. You want to let your reader know what type of book it is in your title, just like you do in the genre. And one of the biggest things about that is that your title needs to look like other titles in the genre. And that's where my original title really failed. It doesn't look like any other.
Copying everybody's title, but
no.
I mean, it's fantasy book, epic fantasy books. It's always a blank and a blank of blank.
Right.
Right. Like
Game of Thrones, Storm of Swords, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. You can see a pattern there. There's a lot of that. Supernatural thriller books tend to have a lot of the male-centric ones tend to have a lot of two-word titles. It's very common for them to be puns. Jim Butcher's books are all two-word titles. They're all puns. They're almost all. That's right. There's one or two that are one-word titles. Even the one-word titles have multiple meanings. I wouldn't call them puns, but they have multiple meanings. And they're usually puns that involve something supernatural. So again, my title, War Demons, the sequel that I've been working on for forever, it isn't done yet. The sequel is going to be entitled Spirit Cooking. There's a whole lot of puns and meanings in that word, following the patterns. So you want to have a title that fits the genre that you're in and conveys that to the reader to get them to pick it up and read the blurb.
So if you have noticed the pattern, the whole thing is about taking every single one of these aspects and clearly expressing what the book actually is to people.
That's right.
Because people, like we said earlier, actually have very particular tastes, and reading is something they do for leisure, and they want to read what they really like.
So another thing to think about when you're thinking about titles, you want to convey the genre and all of that. On a book cover, you have limited space. You really don't want a long cover on your book, or a long title on your book cover, excuse me. You want a fairly short title that people can grasp and wrap their head around pretty quickly, and you want it fairly short so that you can make it really big and people can read it and see it on your cover. But Amazon gives you something a little extra. If you go look at your books page on Amazon, you have a very limited space for the blurb. You have almost as much pixel space for your title as you have for your blurb. Now, the text size on that's going to be way larger, so you're not going to be able to fit as many words in. But pixel size, you have almost as much space, and Amazon will let you add a subtitle to your book. Use it. And use it to tell people exactly what kind of book you have. On the cover, my book is labeled War Demons. On Amazon, it shows up as War Demons, a Catholic action horror novel that explains very quickly in the book what the book is.
We also did it on this one where it'll say, well, I mean, we do it on all of them, but this one is particular. It's Woe for a Fairy, a clean, paranormal, fallen angel romance. Okay? So clean romance is a specific thing where it's not very steamy and everything. So anybody that's looking for like kind of erotic romance read knows straight off the bat that this is not going to have what they wanted. And then it also specifies, fallen angel is a thing. And that way it's just an extra tool in your toolbox when someone is looking at your book to be like, oh, I love fallen angel romances. So I'm going to click through and look at this one.
Yeah. And that's an important point that goes back to everything we're saying here. You really, really, really want to identify the book to the right reader, and you need to know who your right reader is. That goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, genre.
And there's several reasons for this.
But we'll cover this more in a podcast later on the basics of marketing, but an important rule of thumb for marketing, if your target customer is everybody, your target customer is nobody. You can't sell to everybody. It will not happen. Don't try. Even Coca-Cola, biggest brand, one of the biggest brands in the country, doesn't sell to everybody. Half the soda drinkers like Pepsi, right? You can't sell to everybody. Don't try. Figure out who your audience is and target them very specifically and leave out. It's very easy to get stuck in a mindset of, well, this person might like it too. Well, they might, but your conversion rate with that group is going to be really small. Your conversion rate with the right target market is going to be really big. Go for the right target market.
It's much easier to sell to the right target market. It is
much easier to sell to the right target market. So know who your target is and focus on them. Don't worry about anybody else. Somebody else still might pick up your book and might like it, or they might not. But focus on your target. Focus on your target.
And the other reason why you really have to target right is if you're selling on Amazon, then you want to make use of the Amazon algorithms. And if you don't sell to the right people, then Amazon will start trying to sell it to the wrong people for you, and then your book will fall into oblivion.
So we're going to take a brief interlude on that before we go to our next scheduled topic. If you're watching this podcast and you're an indie author in the modern age, most of your sales are going to come from Amazon. That's the cold, hard reality. Okay? You may choose to be wide, or you may choose to be Kindle Unlimited. If you don't know what those mean, don't worry about it right now. We'll have a totally separate podcast on that later. But either way, the majority of your revenue is going to come from Amazon. So you have to understand something important about Amazon. If you do everything right for your book, Amazon will help sell your book for you. They have special algorithms that they run. They know all of their customers. They know everything all of their customers have bought from them. And their customer base is huge. They have lots and lots and lots of data on these people. And so what they will do is they will analyze your book based on what other books the people who bought your book are buying. And they will try to find more people like that group, and they will try to sell your book to those other people. And so what you have to do is you have to help Amazon know what kind of book you're selling. Okay, this is one of the things going back to the title we were talking about. Amazon will pick up on your title and use keywords from it. And so you want to make sure you have keywords that match right, that help Amazon figure out who to sell your book to. You want to make sure that you've picked all of this. If you pick it right and Amazon picks the right people, it will sell more of your books and it'll love you and it will help you sell books. If you pick it wrong and Amazon picks the wrong people to sell your book to, Amazon will not help you at all. It will be zero help and it will be up to you to sell every copy of your book. Don't do that. Let Amazon help you as much as you possibly can. Which brings us into the next two categories. The next one on my list is reviews. If you're going to launch a book and sell a book, in 2020 as an indie author online, you have to have reviews on your book. If you put your book up there and there's no reviews and nobody knows who you are, people aren't going to pick up your book. They're going to look at it and be, well, this book has 0 reviews. It must not be any good. If you're Stephen King or George R.R. Martin, you can put out a book with 0 reviews and you'll sell just fine. But if you're those guys, you're not watching this podcast. You don't need us. Okay? If you're a mere mortal like the rest of us, you have to have reviews. For some of the marketing things we're going to recommend at the end of this podcast, you have to have at least 5 to 10 reviews on your book or they won't even look at you. So they'll reject you out of hand. So whatever you need to do, go find friends and family if you have to. It's better if you can find people who are readers in the same genre that your book is in. But if you can't find that as a brand new author, do whatever you have to do. Find friends, find family, anything that's within Amazon's terms of service. Do not break those. They will boot you off of Amazon and not pay you the royalties they owe you. Okay? So follow their guidelines. But within those guidelines, do whatever you have to do to get 10 reviews. Give out free books. Beg and borrow, beg and plead with family and friends. Go out onto online communities and find people who like your books. Offer them free copies. Whatever you have to do to make sure you get 10 reviews, preferably on launch day, but within the first week or so. As an unknown author, you have to have that.
You don't really have to have a lot more than that.
You don't have to have a lot more than that.
So don't go crazy. Like hundreds and hundreds of reviews.
People will tell you have to, if you hit 50 reviews, you'll trigger Amazon's algorithms. No, you won't. I've run enough books through that hit 50 reviews. I can promise you there is no magic number that starts to trigger Amazon's algorithms. I've put too many books through. Okay? What I will tell you is that if you have less than 10 to 15, then people who are looking at your book, thinking about buying it, are mostly going to say no. Okay? And all the marketing places that will help you promote your book, unless you already have a track record with them, are going to say no. Okay, if you have a track record with them already, I can go to those sites now and put in a book that has 1 or 2 or 0 reviews, and they will mostly accept it because I have put 50 books through those sites, and they know that their readers are going to like the books I give.
And that it's high,
and that it meets their standards. As a brand new author, you can't do that. I couldn't do that with my first few books either. I had to hit the minimum thresholds. So do that. It sucks, but I'm also going to tell you, if you're giving out free books for reviews, you're going to have to give out about 3 or 4 times as many as the number of reviews you want. If you want 10 reviews, you're probably going to have to give out 40 to 50 copies of your book. Even your friends and family, even when they promise you they will, only about a quarter of them are actually going to review your book. And that's your friends and family who have promised you they're going to review it. Outside of that group, it's going to be more like 5%, 10% of the books you give away, people are going to actually review. So it sucks. But if you're going to get those reviews, you're going to have to give away a lot of books in the beginning. And it's painful. It's terrible. You don't want to do it. You're thinking, man, every one of these is somebody who might buy your book. Well, number one, no, they're not, because you're a brand new author. They don't know who you are. They wouldn't buy your book anyway for half of them. But number two, that review is worth 10 sales. As a general rule of thumb, any review on your book is probably worth 10 sales, maybe more. So it's worth getting those reviews. You want to get them. Anything you want to add to that?
No, just that outside of that, there are books that sell like crazy that only have like 20 reviews on it. You don't need to get super hung up on the number of reviews once you hit the minimum.
I'm going to reiterate what I said before. People will tell you have to have 10 reviews on launch day, 15, 20 reviews on launch day. They will tell you, once you hit 50 reviews, Amazon's algorithms will pick you up. 100 reviews.
Yeah, I've seen like at least 4 or 5 different versions with different numbers of reviews floating around.
There is a lot of things people will say about Amazon algorithms that is total baloney. Okay? And again, I've run 50 books through their system now. I know what's baloney that people are saying. We've done a lot of the things people have said to do, and we've seen no difference whatsoever. Okay? So be very cautious on trusting anybody when they talk about Amazon's algorithms. Take it all with a grain of salt. Most people don't know what they're talking about. We're going to run an entire podcast on Amazon's algorithms and hit that on another date. But you do need to have a minimum number of reviews. I would say that 10 to 15 should be considered your minimum goal for a book. You really want to hit that as quickly as you can. After that, you can relax. They'll come in at whatever pace they come in. Worry about selling your book. It does help to have more. Every extra review is going to help, but it's not really helping with Amazon algorithms. It's helping when somebody picks up and looks at it and says, oh, this book has 300 reviews. They look at it on Amazon and say, oh, this book has 300 reviews and it's 4.5 stars. It must be pretty good. Okay? It's social proof that it's providing. It will help you sell your book, but it's not an algorithm thing. But again, you need to hit that minimum. And 10 to 15 reviews is actually not that hard to get. It was a little tough for us in the beginning, but these days it's not that bad.
And we'll cover on another more in-depth episode places like tools you can use to help with
how you can get reviews within Amazon's terms of service. We will absolutely cover that on another podcast.
But we're just trying to give you the basic overview here.
The last thing that's really part of your book explicitly is in the modern era selling books online, you've got to think through keywords. People are buying books on Amazon, and Amazon, they're finding them largely through search engines, or Amazon is ranking them through search engines. And you have to get the keywords right on your book, okay? So part of that can come from your book's title. When you publish a book on Amazon, an ebook, Amazon gives you the ability to add 7 distinct keywords to your book. Now, I'm going to caveat that. They let you add 7 distinct keywords, but think of it, each one, they call it a keyword. Think of it as a key phrase instead. Your key phrase can be fairly long. I think it's like 128 characters for each one or something. It's pretty long. I don't remember the exact length, but they can be pretty long. So you can put more than one in there. And I'm going to do a screen share here for a minute and show you just one of the things that's why, why this is so important. You need to get your keywords right. So one of the things Amazon does is it lets you pick the category to put your book in. And you'll see a screen here. This is just for the science fiction and fantasy genre. So if I choose to put my book in science fiction and fantasy, you'll see under this list on the left where it says category, you'll see all these different subcategories: angels, devils and demons, dragons, scrolling down under sci-fi, AI or aliens or mutants, space pirates. Down a little further, you'll see science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, or fantasy Arthurian. So for all of these subcategories, you have to put your book in science fiction or fantasy first, and then you have to have the right keywords in your book somewhere, in your description, in your keywords, or in your title in order to get put in those categories. And Amazon gives you this handy guide that says, hey, if you want to get in this subcategory, here's the keywords you need to use. And that's what's on the right-hand side of this chart. You want that because you want to be in as specific a subcategory as you can possibly get into. Amazon's categories are huge. They're huge categories. They're main categories, very big. And if you stay in the top level categories, you're going to be competing against the absolute best sellers of the best sellers on Amazon. But if you get yourself put in the smallest subcategory you can get in that actually fits your book, you're going to have a much better chance of ranking higher and showing up on those top 100 pages for Amazon for that subgenre where people will actually see your book and buy it. So you really want to get those keywords right. It'll help when people are searching for your book, and it'll help Amazon figure out what is your book like so they know who to recommend it to. So it's very, very important you get those keywords right. So anything you want to add to that? Last major topic, this is distinct from your book. If you put your book out, you want to sell your first book. So I'm going to tell you the bad news. If you put your book out on Amazon and do everything right that we just told you and put it up on Amazon, it's going to sell 0 copies. Amazon doesn't know who you are. They don't know who your book is. If you have a track record as a previous best-selling author, they may try to show your book to a few people and you may sell some. Maybe. If you don't have that track record, they ain't going to show it to nobody. Nobody's going to buy it. So you have to market your book. You have to market your book. If you don't, it will sell 0 copies, even if you did everything else right that's on our list. So you have to get out there and promote it. What can you do to promote your book? What are the basic things you can do? First thing, talk about it.
Yep.
Tell your friends, tell your family, put it on all your social media.
Yeah, social media. Don't count on a lot from social media.
Don't count on a lot from social media. Always be selling is the rule of thumb. We had dinner with an author friend a couple weeks ago. We sat down at the restaurant. The waitress comes out and he's trying to sell his book to the waitress. He's always selling. He actually did a fairly good job of it. Always sell. Always be selling. Tell everybody about your book. That's the easy and obvious one. That alone is not going to sell you a lot of books. You're going to want to get out there, find places where there are groups on Amazon, groups on Facebook and other social media sites where you're allowed to post about your book and share it. Find those. Find other authors. Get them to help talk about your book. And they will usually want you to help promote their book in exchange. It's a very fair trade. You need to look into paid advertising. Amazon's moving more and more away from helping you sell your book through their algorithms to requiring you to pay them for advertising to sell your book. It sucks, but it's the reality. You need to adjust to it. We'll do a whole podcast on their advertising system. It's a beast of its own that you need to understand. Facebook. I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. I truly and honestly think the site is of the devil. And yet, as a businessman, it is the most powerful marketing tool, advertising tool ever created. And if you're in business today and you're not using it, and if you're selling books as a self-published author, you are in business. If you're not using that in the modern age, you need to be looking into it. We'll do another podcast on Facebook ads specifically. Twitter ads are a complete total waste of money. Don't use them. I've used them for 3 businesses and had 0 sales ever from hundreds of dollars put into Twitter ads.
We do have an episode upcoming where somebody talks about how they have had better luck selling books through, some tactics they use to sell books through Twitter, but it's not paid advertising.
It's not paid advertising. It's doing actual using the social network as a social network to sell the tools or to sell books. There are sites out there. Typically, you'll hear people refer to them as book promo sites. There are a number of sites out there that maintain very large mailing lists of readers, and they send those readers regular emails. Most of them do once a day. Some of them do less frequent, depending. And each day they will send a new book that is a bargain book that has been submitted to them, that they're going to send to their readers and say, hey, this book is free today or 99 cents on Amazon or whatever. When you're just getting started in the market, those are a fantastic tool and you want to use them. But some are better than others. We'll have a list in the show notes of some of the more reputable ones, and we'll have a link to a good site out there that will help tell you which ones are doing well right now and which ones aren't. You will have to pay them generally to have your book listed, and you'll have to have your book on sale or discounted in order to be on there. It's typically worth it, especially if you stack them right, because it will help Amazon's algorithms know who to sell your book to, and it will help you sell more over time. we'll do a whole podcast on
Yeah.
those later too. And
We have
the process that I use specifically to use those tools to help program Amazon's algorithms.
we have no end of whole episodes
Yeah.
we can do on this. You've signed up for a lot of work, a lot of learning.
The unfortunate thing that we're always told is you finished your book, great. Now the hard work begins of actually trying to sell it. And we say that knowing full well how hard it is to write your first book. It's hard, but selling it's even harder. Last topic we're going to have here is the cold hard reality check. Most indie authors, their first book sells less than 150 copies. Most indie authors, once they run out of their friends and family, and maybe friends of friends, their momentum on their book is dead, and that's it. If you follow all the techniques that we've outlined in this episode tonight, and if you follow up on a lot of our individual episode podcasts, you can do considerably better than that. My first novel has sold thousands of books now. But you are going to have to work for it. You will have to work for it to do that. You will not be able to sell thousands of books by sitting on your rear end unless you get absolutely lucky and Amazon's algorithms pick you up and run with you. And that doesn't really happen to people on their first book generally, unless they plan for it. Here's the other reality. Most of your book sales as an indie author in the modern age are going to come from selling ebooks. You're talking about a product that at most you're probably going to be able to sell for $4 or $5, $3.99, $4.99. And Amazon's only giving you 70% of that. So a $4.99 ebook, you're going to get about $3.50 in royalties for. If you want to make a real living at that, and even if we set the bar fairly low for that, something like, let's say $35K a year, you have to sell 10,000 ebooks to make that $35K a year. That's a lot of ebooks. The math becomes much, much better when you have more than one book. So if you're serious about making this a career, you have to get more books out. It's much easier to get, if you want to make that $35K a year, it's much easier to get 1,000 people to buy 10 of your books than it is to get 10,000 people to buy one book. And the higher you set your baseline income, the more income you need in order to make it a full-time job, the more that math stacks up. If you want to make a 6-figure salary at this, 100K a year, it's a whole lot easier to convince 3,000 people to buy 30 books than it is to convince 100,000 or 30,000 people to buy one, right? So you've really, really got to think about, if you're going to make this a serious career, you've got to be working on the next book. You've got to be getting it out there. You've got to have another book. This is one of the reasons at Silver Empire that we moved to having our new book club model, a subscription model, is it's so much easier to be able to sell that book. The Silver Empire Book Club, once we get somebody in as a subscriber, it's so much easier to sell them another book than it is to go find a new customer. We also built that service in a way that it's a great deal for readers, so we got a good thing out of it. But that's where you're going to have to be. And there is also the saying in our industry that the best advertising for your book is to write the next book. And that's very largely true to a high degree. It's a really big thing. One last anecdote on that. We were sitting at DragonCon one year in the audience watching a panel with some of the absolute best sellers of fantasy genre. Jim Butcher, Kevin J. Anderson, Jonathan Mayberry, I think, was on that panel.
He's like Magnificent Men of Fantasy.
Magnificent Men of Fantasy. So it was men, but we were listening to them, and it struck us that year that every single one of them was not able to quit their job
or be a
work full
bestseller. It's a
time.
big thing to be a bestseller. Or are we
Well,
thinking about a
no,
different panel?
we may be thinking about a different panel, but not one of these guys was able to make it a full-time thing until they had at least 5 or 6 books out. And most of them weren't able to make it a full-time thing until they had 5 or 6 New York Times bestsellers out. So I think it may have been the same panel where they were saying most of them didn't hit the New York Times list. These are trad published guys, most of them dating back to a period when trad pub pushed their new authors a lot more than they do now. And they weren't even making bestseller lists until their 5th or 6th novels either. Usually their 5th or 6th novel in the same series even. So that's the reality of the market. There's another group you should go look at if you're new to all of this. It's called 20 Books to 50K. It's a group run by Craig Martell, great stand-up guy. And basically, the premise of that book is that if you write 20 books, then it's a lot easier. At 20 books, if you market them with modest marketing, that you ought to be able to make around $50K a year in base revenue from that. And they're generally right. And that is one approach to making a living as an author in today's market. It's not the only approach. It's may or may not be the best one for you, but it is an approach, and those guys are worth checking out. They have a lot of good info on marketing books too, even if you don't follow their model.
Yeah. So, we should have an episode talking about the ups and downs of different models.
We should do that. We should do exactly that. Anything else before we go?
No, except maybe we should end on a happier note than...
End on a happier note.
Then
80% of the people who decide they want to write a novel never do.
Yeah.
So you've written your novel and you're here watching us trying to figure out how to sell it. You're already ahead of the curve. You can do it. You can beat 150 copies. I promise you. If you watch and learn from what we're doing, you can beat 150 copies. You can do a lot better than that. And we're here to help you do it.
Yeah.
And we hope you do.
I don't, and Russell doesn't either, feel like this is like a zero-sum game where for us to succeed, you can't, so we're not going to help.
Let's end on that. That's a happy point. So talk to other authors and help out other authors. Get to know other authors. There are some people in this industry who will not help each other out at all, and they think that if I help you sell a book, that's one book I didn't sell. But that's totally wrong. Most of the money in this market is going to be made from what they call whale readers. You're talking about people who read 20 or 30 books a month. A lot of these guys, when they have time, they'll sit down and read a book a day or more sometimes. Okay, and a lot of them do have a lot of time because a lot of the people
they
who fall
ride
in that
public
category,
transit and they read, or any number of those kind of things.
Stay-at-home mom, kids are in school all day, or somebody who's sick and can't do much. There's all kinds of reasons, but a lot of these people are reading literally 20 to 30 books a month. As an individual author, you are not capable of writing enough books to keep that reader happy. You can't do it. As a small publisher, we are not capable of publishing enough books to keep that person happy. We can't do it. We've published 50 books over about 3 years now. We can't publish 50 a month, much less 50 a month in the same genre that reader wants to keep reading. Yeah,
that's the thing is like we said earlier, everyone has their genre. So there's somebody out there who reads 30 military sci-fi books a month.
Right. And if that's your genre, you need to find the other military sci-fi authors. You guys need to be helping to promote each other because your fans want more books and they want them faster than you can write them. And they'll be happy that you told them about another author they like. Mm-hmm. And that other author's fans are going to want more books faster than he can write them. And his fans are going to be happy that he told them about your book. And so don't get into that mindset. Go out there, find other authors, help promote each other's books. That's why we're doing this podcast, okay? We're not doing this, I mean, the author services that we offer, we're doing, and this podcast, it'll help sell us more books if you follow these guidelines, believe it or not. And that's our primary purpose for even wanting to do this in the first place. We want you to succeed because eventually it'll help us succeed. And that's where we want to be. You want that same mindset for yourself. You want to be out there helping other authors. It is absolutely where you need to be. So find them. And the good news is most of the other indie authors out there right now know that, and they want to help you too. As long as you're reciprocating and as long as you're respectful. They
don't be that guy that takes everybody's help and then doesn't do anything.
Don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy, and you will get the reputation very fast if you do that. All right. Well, again, I'm Russell Newquist.
And I'm Morgan Newquist.
We're with Silver Empire. This is our new podcast. We're going to be back same time next week with our next episode. And what's the next one we're running?
Next episode is we're going to have a couple other authors on, and we're going to have fun telling you guys all the massive mistakes we made as beginning authors.
The worst mistakes. So I've already shown you some of my most embarrassing, but we've got more.
Yep. And
we've got a lot more, and so do the other guys we got on. So come on back and see all the ways we screwed up so that you don't have to do the same thing.
We have a website at
authorsmakemoney.com. Check out the site. We've got various things that we can do to help you sell more books. We've got more things coming as we bring things online.
We'll eventually have a blog there and that kind of thing.
And here's a thing about what we do for our services. I'm going to take just a minute to talk about that. We only put services up there for sale that we use ourselves. Okay? If it's not working and it's not helping us, we're not doing it, because the primary purpose for what we're doing with those services is actually to help us sell more books. So if it's not working, I'm not going to waste my time doing it. So I can tell you that the things that we're doing there do actually work. Everything we're doing there will not work necessarily on its own. You're going to have to be doing other work with it, but it will help you out as part of a good, well-rounded strategy to market your books.
We have a Facebook group that's very simple. It's called Silver Empire Helps Authors Make Money, which is the name of this podcast. And then you can join up, and that will give you information on our newsletter builders, which we'll talk about in another podcast about what they are and why we do them. People trade newsletter slots. They make connections there. We post news that'll help you.
It's a good place to find people who do things you might need for your book.
Yeah, we've got cover artists editors, and stuff in there.
The like. If you go join, do fill out the questionnaire. There's not much there. It's pretty simple, but if there's no answers to the questions, I'll reject your application.
That's meant to be a nuts and bolts author group. There's no readers in it. There's nothing like that. It's for everyone to talk about the business only, and to help each other out and that kind of thing.
Nice and private, where the readers can't see how the sausage is made. Yep. So you can talk about what you need to without embarrassing yourself. We also run Silver Empire Press, our main business, silverempire.org. You can check out our bookstore there online. You can check out the Silver Empire Book Club, where you can sign up for monthly subscription to get nice, good deals on books. You can check out either one of those.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.